We are talking School of the Damned. This one is directed by Peter Vincent, clearly taking a break from his vampire slaying duties. And this one stars James Groom, who I have seen in a variety of lower budget indie kind of historical movies. And I guess you want to say this is a kind of unofficial sequel to kind of The Village of the Damned, or at least it's kind of very heavily inspired by that. So what we have here, we have James Groom's character who plays a replacement teacher, kind of going into this kind of new school where he is noticing something strange. All of the pupils seem to be very kind of obedient, no real trouble outside of one kind of bully who is also kind of new to the school and seems to be maybe the victim of a domestic abuse. But everyone seems kind of very much keeping themselves, work kind of focused, no kind of messing around. And he notices this kind of group of sort of 4 kids that are kind of kept separately in a kind of a special classroom. And as you can probably guess, these kids have something special and may have an effect on the rest of the pupils. What will happen? You have to watch the movie to find out. So let's discuss what works first of all. So for a lower budget kind of British movie, I have to say this was an extremely intriguing premise. I thought the actual, the idea set out here led for an intriguing setup at least. And we have this kind of this kind of new teacher who I thought was played pretty well by Groom here. I've seen him in a few things, and I have to say his acting was a lot more subtle here. He seems to play very kind of more OTT characters previously in his previous roles that I've seen him in. Here he's very kind of believable as a slightly kind of out of his depth teacher who has had a little bit of a kind of a rocky past, and is accepting of this kind of new position in this school, but seems to not quite know what's going on. Seems to be a little bit out of his depth and kind of but want to do the right thing. He's very kind of proactive in trying to kind of maybe help this kind of like this kid who seems to be kind of maybe getting bullied, or at least he's a bully himself, and he feels that there may be kind of some reasons for that. And it's maybe a little bit too inquisitive for his own good. And I thought he was played very kind of well here by James kind of Groom, who does a good job, to be honest. And the actual setup of the film, like I've said, is very strong. The mystery kind of that surrounds these kind of kids, like I said, if you've seen kind of Village of the Damned, it's relatively it plays its hand quite early on about what's actually kind of going on here in regards to at least what the kids seem to be doing, and they have a genuine menace, although some quite bad wigs, it has to be said, but nonetheless, they do seem like they're set up to be like they could be potentially very dangerous. And it reminds me of like things like the X-Men, where you're having like Jean Grey, who's a very kind of powerful mutant, and you are in fear of what you're saying to her. And it seems like all the adults around these kids seem to be kind of like fearful of them and kind of watching what they're saying. And this like little kind of leader one, although not really saying anything at all, it is pretty threatening, like I've said. So that was kind of quite good. And the other interesting fact I liked about the kind of their setup here is these kids aren't necessarily set up as being evil. They are just kind of like doing what they think is right, but because they are kids, they see things in very kind of simple terms, like good and bad. Like smoking is bad and must be kind of punished, and there's no kind of the nuances obviously that you develop when you're an adult ultimately. So this whole school is being kind of ruled by these particular kind of kids who have a very childlike kind of view of kind of life, which I thought was quite good. And as the movie goes on, we're progressing, and I thought the acting was all pretty good, I've got to say, and obviously the intrigue kind of grows from there. Maybe what doesn't work, however, with this story is I feel that it doesn't adequately kind of explain certain things. We have these 4 kids, but it's clear there's one of them which is in control here, and I found the other ones to be somewhat superfluous and didn't really know how they've ended up kind of like all 4 of these kind of kids ended up sort of being psychic. One of the other kids appears to be the sister of the kind of the main ones, which I can get that one, but the other 2 do seem to have been plucked out of obscurity, and we're never really told anything about kind of like, you know, how they've ended up like this. And there are also a few other points with the story here that I just think are a little bit contrived and a little bit convoluted in certain areas. So although the setup here is, I would say, a particularly strong setup, the execution of the narrative from that point is a little bit of a kind of like hit and miss, unfortunately. The movie, I feel, it tends to drag in places just a little bit. There's not quite enough kind of going on in certain scenes that makes the movie a little bit too slow for its own good. The movie also does get a little bit silly in places. One I'll point out to is we have a fight between 2 teachers, and they have overdubbed the kind of the sounds of the punches with from what I can only describe as sound effects from the Street Fighter game, and it looks ridiculous. So there are some sort of odd choices here that just make the film kind of go into kind of schlocky territory. But I've got to say, I thought the setup here was very good, and I actually I enjoyed the central character. Good performance by James Groom. The actual kids, I felt, were portrayed as menacing but not necessarily evil, and I thought that was a really subtle and kind of like you know, kind of somewhat kind of rare thing, to be honest with you. They're not simply evil, they're just children who don't know any better. Anyway, overall I'll give this one a 6 out of 10. I think it's worthwhile for if you like your kind of these slow burns and more of your intrigue, mystery, rather than kind of like out and out horror movies. 6 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I shall look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.